I did everything a good daughter is supposed to do. I paid their mortgage. I bought their groceries. I covered their insurance. I sacrificed my future so they could have a present. And the price for my loyalty. Being called a parasite and thrown out on Christmas night only to discover a secret, a cruel secret that they have reserved for me. My name is Clara, and this is the true story of how my love for my family almost cost me everything I had and everything I was. Before I share my story, I want to know you are here with me. Just say listening in the comments or let me know where you are. I love hearing how far my story reached. Don't forget to subscribe and join me on this journey, where the unspoken feelings of the past finally find their voice. Sometimes, even the smallest connection can make a story feel heard. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. The first thing I remember after the explosion of words was a damp, biting cold that had nothing to do with the December air of Port Meridian. It was the chill of a park bench seeping through my thin coat, the rigid iron pressing into my spine as the city's late-night fog swirled around my ankles. I don't know how long I sat there. Time had become a thick, syrupy thing. But eventually, a pair of familiar shoes stopped in front of me. Julian's. He said my name, his voice a soft anchor in the swirling chaos of my mind. He didn't ask what happened. He simply draped his own scarf around my neck, helped me to my feet, and led me away. Now, I'm awake. The morning light is a soft gray filter through the large arched window of Julian's apartment, the one above his art gallery. The space is the opposite of my own home. It's clean, minimalist, and smells of coffee and old paper, a scent that has always been my sanctuary. My home, the one I left last night, always smelled of damp history and decay, a sweetness that was really just rot. My movements are slow, as if wading through water. I trace the spines of the books on his shelves, their leather and cloth covers, a familiar comfort under my trembling fingertips. This is my world. A world of order, of careful preservation, of mending what is broken. A world where value is understood and cherished. A mug of tea appears in my hand. Julian is there, his expression gentle, asking nothing. "When you're ready, Clara," he says, his voice low. "This room is yours, for as long as you need." His simple kindness is a physical blow. I feel a knot tighten in my throat, a pressure behind my eyes that should be tears, but nothing comes. My well of emotion has run dry, leaving only a hollow, echoing cavern. My phone, which has been silent on the coffee table, suddenly buzzes. The screen lights up with a name that makes my stomach clench. Eleanor. My mother. A text message. "Darling, your father was just upset. Come home, we can talk this out." Don't make things more difficult than they need to be. I stare at the words. Don't make things more difficult. The language of a benefactor, of someone graciously allowing me to fix a mess of my own making. There is no apology, no remorse, just an order wrapped in the thin tissue of feigned affection. And in that moment, any lingering, foolish flicker of hope that this was all a terrible heat-of-the-moment mistake is extinguished. This wasn't a crack in the foundation. It was a planned demolition. The china? We only ever used it for Christmas. The plates with the delicate hand-painted holly leaves. They were one of the last vestiges of a grander past. Eleanor clung to a past I was now solely responsible for funding. The tension at the dinner table last night had been a living thing, thick and suffocating. The candlelight flickered, casting long shadows that made the cracks in the plaster walls look like dark veins. My mother, Eleanor, played the part of the gracious hostess, her voice a brittle melody as she spoke. "Thank goodness Clara's little hobby can keep us afloat," she'd said to my father, with a theatrical sigh loud enough for me to hear from the kitchen. "It's so important we keep up appearances." My father, Arthur, didn't respond. He was too busy holding court, pontificating about the historical inaccuracies of a new map of the city, completely ignoring the feast I had spent 2 days preparing. Across from me, my younger sister Iris was a ghost at the table. She pushed her food around her plate, her fork never rising to her lips. Her eyes, wide and fearful, kept darting towards me before quickly looking away. She knew something. I could feel it. Trying to break the oppressive silence, I chose a moment between Arthur's lecture and Eleanor's next sigh. "I have some good news," I said. The Port Meridian City Library has commissioned me to restore their collection of 18th century manuscripts. It's a huge honor." For a second, there was silence. I saw a flicker of something surprise in Iris's eyes, but it was extinguished as Arthur slammed his wineglass down on the table. The red liquid sloshed dangerously close to the rim. He let out a short, ugly laugh. "An honor," he sneered, his eyes glinting in the candlelight. "Or is it just another way to show the world you no longer need the name Mitchell?" The attack was so sudden, so vicious, it stole the air from my lungs. "What? No, that's not. Don't play coy," he spat, leaning forward. "You think we don't see it? The way you swan into this house paying the bills as if you're the lord of the manor. You think that money gives you power over me, over this family?" He was on his feet now, his voice rising to a roar. "You stroll through this house, a house built on the legacy of my ancestors, acting like you own it when you're nothing but a leech feeding on a history you never earned." The word hung in the air, vibrating with hate. Leech. I looked to my mother. My vision tunneled until she was the only one I could see. I pleaded with my eyes for her to say something, anything, to defend me. She simply stared down her fingers, meticulously folding and refolding the linen napkin in her lap. Her silence was her verdict. A clatter broke the spell. Iris had dropped her fork. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. The part of me that could do those things felt like it had been cauterized. With a strange, chilling calm, I placed my knife and fork neatly on my plate. I dabbed my lips with my own napkin. Then I lifted my gaze and met my father's furious stare. "I understand," I said. And my voice was perfectly, terrifyingly still. My room, tucked into the attic of the old house, had always been my refuge. It smelled of my work of aging paper leather and bookbinder's glue. It was the only part of the house that felt truly mine. And now, I was dismantling it. I worked with a methodical precision that felt like the only thing holding me together. This wasn't a frantic escape. It was a careful, deliberate amputation. I wrapped each of my grandfather's antique silver bookbinding tools in soft cloth, their familiar weight, a small comfort in my hands. I slid my rare reference books into a reinforced box. With each item I packed, I was reclaiming a piece of my identity that this house had tried to consume. Eleanor appeared at the doorway, a silhouette against the dim hall light. "Clara, don't be so childish. You know your father. He just gets—" I know I said, my back still to her. The finality in my tone must have surprised her because she fell silent. For a moment, I thought but then her voice returned, stripped of any pretense of maternal concern. Well, before you go, did you remember to pay the invoice for the wellness retreat? It's due tomorrow. I wouldn't want it to affect our credit score. Our. The word was a final twisting knife. Even now, as I was being exiled, my only function was financial. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. As I carried the last box, the one with my grandfather's tools, down the creaking attic stairs, a figure darted from the shadows of the corridor. It was Iris. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and guilt. She didn't speak. She just shoved something small and hard into my hand. It was her little sketchbook. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking. Before I could respond, she turned and fled back into the darkness of her room. I stood there for a moment, the sketchbook clutched in my hand. It felt heavier than it should, weighted with the secrets I knew it held. It was both a confession and a warning, and a profound sense of dread settled over me. A few days passed in a gray haze at Julian's apartment. I'd started to carve out a small corner of existence for myself. I needed to find the insurance policy for my tools. The thought of them being unprotected, even packed away, was unsettling. That meant going through the box of books I'd been working on when my life imploded. One of them was a heavy tome on the fall of the Roman Empire, one of Arthur's favorites that I'd been rebacking for him. As I lifted it, something felt wrong. The balance was off. The spine felt unnaturally thick. My restorer's instincts, honed over years, screamed that the book's structure had been compromised. With the delicate precision of a surgeon, I took one of my scalpels and carefully sliced along the inner hinge of the front cover, peeling back the end paper. My breath caught. A section of the bookboard had been expertly hollowed out. Nestled inside the cavity was a small leather-bound ledger. It wasn't an antique. The leather was supple, the paper crisp. My hands trembled as I opened it. The pages were filled with my father's meticulous script, a running tally of deposits under a single heading, Meridian Heritage Fund. Large sums, thousands of dollars deposited every month for the last 6 months. Tucked into the back were printouts of correspondence with an auction house in Belgium regarding a rare map called the Sovereign's Reach. A cold, clarifying rage washed over me. So this was it, the proof. He had been siphoning off the money I gave for household expenses, building a secret fund for his selfish, expensive hobby. A part of me was almost relieved. It was pathetic, it was deceitful, but at least it made a kind of sense. It was the simple, grubby story of a resentful, greedy man. I felt like I could finally breathe, finally understand the shape of the betrayal. Then I turned to the last page. A small note was clipped to the paper. The handwriting wasn't my father's methodical scrawl. It was my mother's elegant, looping cursive. My blood ran cold as I read the words. Arthurus is the final amount from Clara's medical fees. It's enough for the deposit. The agent in Lisbon confirmed the seaside apartment will be ready in February. We can finally begin again, just the two of us. The world tilted. I had to grip the table to keep from falling. Lisbon, the two of us. The Heritage Fund wasn't for a map. The map was a lie, a distraction. The fund was for them to escape, to start a new life in Portugal funded by me. Every fabricated emergency of the last 6 months flashed through my mind: the leaky roof, the broken furnace, Eleanor's expensive medical fees for her nerves. It was all a lie, a systematic, coordinated plunder. They hadn't just been taking my money. They had been draining my future to build their own. And kicking me out wasn't a moment of fury, it was their final withdrawal. Sleep didn't come. As Port Meridians slumbered under a blanket of night, I was wide awake, the damning note from my mother seared into my memory. The shock, however, had begun to crystallize. The shivering, helpless girl on the park bench was gone. In her place was something cold, something sharp. The grief was still there, a vast dark ocean inside me, but on its surface, a sheet of ice was forming. I turned Julian's living room floor into my war room. I laid everything out, the counterfeit ledger, my bank statements going back a year, printed emails from Eleanor detailing her necessary treatments, and every utility bill I had paid. It looked like the blueprint of a ruin, the anatomical chart of a betrayal. My skills as a restorer usually spent mending torn pages and reattaching broken spines were now repurposed. I wasn't restoring, I was deconstructing. I took out my highlighters, yellow for my income, every dollar earned through painstaking hours hunched over ancient manuscripts, pink for Eleanor's fabricated medical emergencies and social obligations, and a venomous green for the deposits into Arthur's Meridian Heritage Fund. The lines and colors wove a sickening tapestry. A transfer of $5,000 from my savings to cover a cracked foundation in August was followed a day later by a $5,000 deposit into their Lisbon Escape Fund. My bonus in October, which I'd used to pay for Eleanor's 2-week stay at a wellness retreat for her nerves, appeared in their ledger under the note "Final Installment," ready for wire. I laid it all out for Julian, my voice flat, devoid of emotion, as I explained the Lisbon plan. He listened, his expression hardening, from concern to quiet fury. He didn't offer pity, he offered validation. "Clara, this isn't a family falling out," he said, his voice firm. "This is calculated, premeditated fraud. They've been planning this for months." His words solidified my resolve. This was not a wound to be mourned. It was a crime to be answered. My first call wasn't to them. It was to the 24/7 fraud department of my bank. My voice was calm, professional, as if I were discussing the archival properties of a certain type of paper. "I need to place a top-tier security freeze on all my accounts," I stated. "I want a verbal password 2-factor authentication for all transfers and an immediate alert for any inquiry, no matter how small." I was no longer just mending the past. I was fortifying the future. This was the first brick in my new wall. The next morning, I tried to lose myself in my work. I sat at a small desk Julian had cleared for me, the familiar scent of aging vellum a temporary balm. I was attempting to repair the water damage on a 19th century botanical illustration, but my hands, usually so steady, betrayed me. My mind wasn't on the delicate veins of the painted leaf. It was on the intricate web of lies my family had spun. My phone rang, an unknown number from a local area code. I almost ignored it, but some instinct made me answer. "Clara, darling." The voice was syrupy sweet, instantly recognizable. My Aunt Beatrice, the family matriarch. "Your mother called me." "Oh, I was so worried to hear you're having a bit of a crisis." I held the phone, saying nothing, my knuckles whitening as I gripped it. "Eleanor told me everything," she continued, her tone dripping with condescending pity. "That you've been having these paranoid fantasies, spending money wildly, and then blaming your poor parents. You poor thing, the stress of your little job must have finally gotten to you." The narrative was already written. I was the unstable, ungrateful daughter. I was about to hang up to refuse to participate in their fiction when Beatrice delivered the killing blow. Your mother was so concerned for your well-being, she felt it was her duty to phone Mr. Abernathy at the city library just to check in, to make sure you were well enough to be handling their priceless manuscripts. She was terrified you might damage something in your current state. The air left my lungs. It was a masterful, vicious move. This wasn't just gossip. This was a direct assault on my livelihood, my reputation, my sanctuary. They were trying to poison the one part of my life they hadn't yet touched. In their story, my meticulous, disciplined craft was now the symptom of a fraying mind. I could no longer afford to be silent. Hiding would be an admission of guilt. They had brought the war to my doorstep, and I had no choice but to answer. My grief transformed into cold, efficient fury. I spent the rest of the day on the phone, a list of accounts and numbers spread before me like a battle plan. With each call, my voice grew steadier, sharper. To the power company, I am revoking my status as the primary bill payer for the account at 14 Hawthorne Lane, effective immediately. To the internet provider, yes, I'm sure. Please terminate the service registered under the name Clara Mitchell. To the insurance agency, I need to set a security password for any and all changes to my policies. No, my mother does not have authorization to make inquiries. Each call was a snip of the scissors, severing another thread that bound me to them. A small, clean victory. I was untangling myself, reclaiming my name, my finances, my life. I started to feel a sliver of relief, a sense of control returning. The final call on my list was to the Port Meridian Heritage Guild, a ridiculously expensive society. Eleanor had insisted we join for the social connections. I canceled the membership that was auto-renewing from my account. An excellent decision, the man on the phone said, with a surprising candidness. You've made it just in time. What do you mean? I asked. It's just a coincidence. But an hour ago, we received a call from a woman identifying herself as your mother. She attempted to upgrade your membership to the Platinum Patron Circle. She said it was to be a surprise Christmas gift for you and asked to put the $5,000 charge on the card on file. The relief I'd felt moments before vanished, replaced by a jolt of adrenaline. This wasn't a cleanup operation. This was a race. They weren't just reacting to my departure. They were still actively trying to bleed me dry, using the last few hours of their access like looters in a burning city. The urgency of my situation became terrifyingly clear. I wasn't just building a wall. I was trying to build it faster than they could tear it down. That evening, a cold rain began to lash against the windows of the gallery, mirroring the turmoil inside me. Julian and I were eating a quiet dinner when a sound from downstairs. It wasn't a knock. It was a violent, rhythmic pounding, the sound of a fist hitting the heavy oak door of the main entrance. The entire building seemed to vibrate with it. Then came the voice, a roar of pure, undiluted rage. Clara, open this door. You think you can steal my money and hide from me? Julian was on his feet, instantly motioning for me to stay back. He peered through the security peephole on his apartment door, which overlooked the main entrance hall. His body went rigid. It's him. Through the thick wood, I could hear Arthur's bellowing. He was shouting about being disrespected, about me destroying our family, about the money I owed him. The pounding intensified. Then a door across the hall from the main entrance opened. It was Monsieur Dupont, a retired history professor who lived in the building, a man Arthur would have tried to impress under any other circumstances. "Is there a problem here, sir?" Seeing an audience seemed to break something in my father. "This is none of your business, old man!" he screamed, and then he turned back to the door and kicked it. A sickening crack echoed up the stairwell as the wood around the lock splintered, but I wasn't panicking. I was calm. Because after the smear campaign and the race against their fraud, I had started to think like them always, one step ahead. A few days ago, I'd persuaded Julian to install a smart doorbell with a high-definition camera. I pulled out my phone. With a tap, I was watching a live feed of my father's face, contorted with rage. I hit record. Every word, every blow against the door was being documented in crystal clear audio and video. By the time the police, whom Julian had already called, arrived, I had an airtight case file on my watching my father, a man obsessed with status and appearances, being handcuffed and escorted out of a respectable, historic building in front of his academic peer was a surreal, hollow victory. When the officer came to take my statement, I didn't just give my account. I emailed him the video file. I'd like to file for a restraining order. I said, my voice as steady as the hand that held the phone. My father's violence hadn't broken me. It had just handed me the weapon I needed to keep him away for good. A fragile peace settled in over the next 2 days. The restraining order was in place. My father was out on bail, but legally forbidden from coming near me. For the first time, I felt like I could take a full, deep breath. A glimmer of hope arrived in my inbox. It was an email from Mr. Abernathy, the head archivist at the city library. He acknowledged he'd received a concerning call from my mother, but wanted to assure me of his confidence in my professionalism. He asked to meet next week to discuss the manuscript project and clear the air. It seemed I might be able to salvage my career from the wreckage after all. A wave of relief washed over me. Maybe, just maybe, the worst was over. And then a second email appeared. The sender was Marcus, the owner of a small, reputable auction house I occasionally did freelance work for. The subject line read, "A strange consignment." My heart began to pound. "Hi, Clara," the email began. "Hope you're well. A strange lot came in today under your family name, Mitchell, and I felt I should give you a heads up before we catalog it. It's a set of antique silver book binding tools and a silver locket. Knowing their connection to your grandfather, I thought you should know. Is everything all right?" My breath hitched. Eleanor hadn't gone to a grimy, anonymous pawn shop. She had taken them to a place within my own professional world, a place where she knew the news would get back to me, a place designed to inflict maximum humiliation. But the true cruelty was in the attachment. Marcus had scanned the consignment form. In the box labeled "Reason for Sale," my mother's elegant script spelled out a devastating lie, liquidating daughter's abandoned effects to cover outstanding debts. The screen blurred. The brief sense of safety I'd felt shattered into a million pieces. This wasn't just theft. This was character assassination. She was creating a false paper trail, meticulously building their narrative that I was the unstable, indebted party. My father used his fists. My mother, I now realized, was far more dangerous. She used a pen. The vast, silent reading room of the Port Meridian City Library felt like neutral ground, a sanctuary of truth and history. Sunlight streamed through the tall, arched windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I chose a secluded table in the cartography section, the irony not lost on me. Iris arrived looking like a ghost, her artist's smock hanging loosely on her frail frame. I didn't begin with accusations. I simply slid 2 pieces of paper across the polished oak table, the printed email from Marcus the auctioneer, and a clear photograph I had taken of our grandfather's silver locket. She stared at them, and the fragile composure she had maintained shattered. A choked sob escaped her lips, a sound of pure agony. The dam of fear and guilt finally broke. I heard them, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I heard them talking about Lisbon for weeks. I saw her take the box from your room. I wanted to say something. Claire, I swear I did. But I was so scared. Her hands trembling, pushed her small sketchbook across the table toward me. I drew things to try and make sense of it. I opened it. It was more than just sketches. It was a meticulous subconscious chronicle of a conspiracy. Alongside a drawing of a coastline was a scribbled note, Alfama Apartment, Riverview. Next to a sketch of our mother on the phone was a date and a frantic scribble, flights after Christmas. On the final page, a drawing of a bank logo with the words, close account in January. This wasn't just a sketchbook. It was a confession. It was the irrefutable proof I needed. As my fingers traced the damning words, Iris pushed her phone across the table, her face ashen. He sent this, she choked out. It was a message from Arthur's lawyer, a cold clinical text. Iris, your sister has chosen her path. It is time for you to choose yours. Your spring semester tuition is due for payment next month. Remember who provides for your education. The threat was brutally clear. The evidence in my hand could win my war, but the price of using it might be my sister. They had created one last perfect trap, forcing me to choose between justice for myself and the life of the one person left who I might be able to save. The call came 2 days later from a number I didn't recognize. I answered, and a voice I knew better than my own, chillingly calm, unnervingly steady, came through the line. It was Eleanor. There was no hysteria, no pleading. She spoke like a diplomat negotiating a treaty. Clara, this has all gone quite far enough. Let's be adults about this. I am prepared to offer a compromise. I said nothing, the silence a weapon she wasn't used to. If you withdraw the police report about those old things and agree to dissolve this ridiculous restraining order, we will be willing to forgive and forget. You can come home. We'll simply tell the family you had a minor breakdown and are feeling much better now. Her audacity was breathtaking. She was offering me the chance to participate in my own gaslighting. When my silence stretched on, she played her final card, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Of course, if you insist on continuing this crusade, people will talk. A young woman making such wild, hysterical accusations against her own parents. It's a narrative, isn't it, darling? And quite frankly, our story of a concerned family trying to manage a troubled, unstable daughter is far more believable than yours. It was the ultimate psychological trap. Submit or be declared insane. But she didn't know about the sketchbook. She didn't know that my fear had been burned away, leaving something hard and unyielding in its place. Eleanor, I said, my voice as cold and clear as ice. I have every receipt for every bill I've paid for the last year. I have the ledger your husband hid in his book. And now I have Iris's dated, annotated sketches of your Lisbon apartment plans. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. Would you like me to present all of that as evidence of my breakdown. The silence that answered me was the sound of a queen realizing she's been checkmated. For the first time, I had won. A week later, I walked up the cracked stone path to my former home for the last time. I was not alone. Beside me was Officer Miller, a calm, professional woman who had read my entire file. Across the street, curtains twitched. The whole neighborhood was watching. Eleanor opened the door, her face a carefully constructed mask of wronged motherhood. The mask faltered when she saw the police uniform. I ignored her, heading straight for the living room and the one large item I had left behind my grandfather's small Art Deco writing desk. As I motioned for the movers I'd hired to take it, Eleanor blocked their path. "You will not take that," she hissed. "It is a Mitchell family heirloom." I was prepared. I opened a folder and produced a receipt. This is the bill of sale from the estate auction where I purchased this desk 2 years ago with my own money after you sold it against grandfather's wishes. I then handed a second document to Officer Miller. And this officer is a copy of my grandfather's will, which bequeathed this desk specifically to me. Eleanor's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She had been outmaneuvered. I felt a grim sense of victory. But the universe had one final act in this drama. Just as the movers lifted the desk, another car pulled up to the curb. A man in a crisp suit got out, holding a briefcase. He wasn't a lawyer. He wasn't family. He walked past all of us with an air of impersonal authority and rapped sharply on the front door. "Eleanor Mitchell," he asked, though. It wasn't a question. He paid no mind to me, the movers, or the police officer. "I am an officer of the court. I'm here to serve you with a foreclosure notice. The bank has approved an accelerated repossession of this property." All the color drained from Eleanor's face. In that instant, we both understood the final, brutal irony. All the money they had bled from me had gone into the Lisbon Fund, not the mortgage. My cutting them off hadn't just spoiled their vacation. It had triggered the financial time bomb they themselves had set. In front of the law, in front of her neighbors, the entire facade of her respectable life crumbled into dust. She hadn't been ruined by my revenge. She had been ruined by her own greed. As I drove away, the desk safely in the back of the truck, I glanced in my rear-view mirror. The front door of the house opened one last time. Iris stepped out, pulling a small suitcase behind her. She didn't look back. 3 months later, the winter light of Port Meridian streamed into my new apartment. It was a small one-bedroom above a quiet bookstore, but it was all mine. The air smelled of fresh paint lemon polish and the comforting scent of old books. My grandfather's desk sat proudly under the window, its polished wood gleaming. The threads of my old life had been cut, and new ones were being woven. My parents had lost the house. They were living, I'd heard, in Aunt Beatrice's basement, their presence a source of constant friction. Arthur was navigating a series of fraud charges, his reputation in the collector's world shattered. Eleanor's social circle had evaporated overnight. 5 letters, all in my mother's handwriting, sat in a neat, unopened stack on my mantelpiece, a monument to a boundary they would never again cross. Iris was thriving. With my help, she had secured student loans and a part-time job at Julian's Gallery. For the first time, she was financially independent. Our sisterhood was being rebuilt not on a shared history of trauma, but on a new foundation of mutual respect and honesty. My career, the thing they had tried so hard to destroy, was flourishing. After I presented my case to Mr. Abernathy, He had not only kept my contract, but had made me the lead restorer on a new prestigious project. My integrity had become my greatest asset. That evening, I sat at my grandfather's desk. In front of me was Iris's sketchbook, its pages wrinkled and stiff in places where her tears had dried. With the delicate touch I usually reserved for medieval manuscripts, I began the process of restoring it, carefully humidifying and pressing each page. I was mending the true family legacy, one of survival, truth, and resilience. A year to the day after the Christmas dinner that broke my world, I was hosting my own holiday. Not Christmas that day, held too many ghosts. It was Thanksgiving, a time for gratitude. My small apartment was filled with warmth and laughter. Julian was there, his presence, a quiet, steady comfort. Iris, now confident and bright-eyed, was showing her latest art portfolio to Monsieur Dupont. Marcus, the auctioneer who had saved my grandfather's heirlooms, was debating the merits of a particular wine with a few other friends I had made. This was my family now. A family built, not inherited. Later, as we cleared the table, Iris told me she'd heard from a cousin. Our parents were renting a tiny rundown apartment on the industrial side of town. They still don't get it, she said, her voice more sad than angry. Dad is still trying to trade map forgeries online. And Mom still tells anyone who will listen that it was all your fault. I looked around the room at the faces of the people I loved, at the life I had painstakingly built. I realized my grandfather's true legacy was never the desk or the silver tools. It was his passion for preservation, for finding and nurturing the value in things others had discarded. In the end, I had preserved the most important thing of all, myself, and in doing so, I had helped preserve my sister. I raised my glass, the light catching the wine. My voice was steady and warm as I offered a toast. To the family we find, I said, and to the courage to draw our own maps. In the end, there was no grand apology, no tearful reunion. The healing didn't happen in a single cinematic moment. It happened quietly, in the paying of my own bills, in the laughter shared with a chosen family, and in the silent, steady work of restoring my own life one page at a time. I learned that you can't fix a foundation that was built on lies. Sometimes you have to build a new one on your own land with your own map. And for staying with me through all of it, thank you. It means more than I can say to not have to hold this story alone anymore. If you've ever had to set a boundary that broke your own heart, if you've ever felt that your family was both your safest harbor and the deepest storm, if you've ever had to fight to prove that your worth is not based on what you can provide for others, or maybe you've never lived this yourself, but some part of my story simply resonated with you and you understand, just comment yes below. Because sometimes the simple act of acknowledging a piece of truth in someone else's story or in your own is the first quiet step toward healing. You don't have to share your story if you're not ready. You don't have to do anything but listen. That is more than enough. I'll be reading every comment, and maybe this little corner of the internet can be a place where our stories are not just told, but truly heard. Until next time, be kind to yourself. The work of restoration is slow, but you are worth the effort.